Welcome to this small summary of this section of chapters from the 9th to the 12th. The first one is called the Supreme Character of Jad Bharata. And we can see that Bharat Maharaj has already taken birth again in a family of Brahmana. Is now called Jad Bharata. And he behaves in a very peculiar way. He tries fully to avoid any influence from the society, even from his family. And in one of the purports, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that that is a duty of a devotee to strictly avoid the company of non-devotees, even within our own family. Quite extreme points anyway, but we just have to understand what it means to associate. That's the crucial point. But internally, Jad Bharata was always chanting and remembering the Lord. And the reason he was behaving like this, avoiding the society, was because he wanted to stay in this state of meditation continuously. He didn't want to be annoyed or bothered. The life of Jad Bharata wasn't very easy. It is described that once this father left his body, the brothers, the stepbrothers and the brothers took over, took charge of him, but they were really abusing him in many ways. So forcing him to do very menial type of activities. But he wasn't bothered anyway. It's interesting in the final part of this chapter that this is the topic, the main story, that there was like a leader of a dacoit party which wanted to find a man to sacrifice to Kali, the goddess Kali. And it happens that they found Jad Bharata and then decided to offer him to this goddess. But what happens is, of course, they didn't understand who really Jad Bharata was. He was a very advanced devotee, he was a pure devotee. So once they put him on the altar to sacrifice him, Kali, goddess Kali, which is a servant of the Lord himself, wasn't pleased at all. So what she did, she completely killed all the dacoits, and of course, as a consequence, Jad Bharata was freed. I find it very relevant this story, because this final story, because that's where my main point of what really I liked is what are the consequences of offending a Vaishnava, and the consequences can be small, but can be really extreme, as losing your life, the chance to advance spiritually. And another point which I discussed in my little essay is about self-defense, and to see how pure devotees really they don't think about self-defense, because they have got no identification with the body. Chapter 10 is entitled The Discussion between Jad Bharata and Maharaj Rahugana. In this section, it's quite interesting to notice the main topic, the main story, which is that King Rahugana was traveling from one city to another one, and then it happened that as it used to be done at the time, that the kings were brought by palanquin. So, but one of the carriers got injured or had some problems, so the other carriers were looking for another person to substitute him. And then they found as the perfect person to do the business, Jad Bharata, which is quite strongly built. So they practically forced him to take up the job, even if I guess was unpaid, to carry the king. But Jad Bharata, being a Brahmana, has qualities, find quite difficult to carry in a proper Shudra way the task of carrier. In fact, meanwhile was carrying this palanquin, being so careful to not injure other living entities as the hands, he was continuously stopping the natural flow of movement of the palanquins and of the other carriers. And that irritated, as you can imagine, the king, which initially approached Jatbharata and just sarcastically chastised him. But so they carried on, but then that happened again, as you can imagine. So what happened is this time the king, with filthy words, just threatened Jatbharata to punish him. At this point, the Uttamadhikari, Jatbharata, came down to the level of Madhyamadhikari and decided to talk. Fatidical moment. And then he started replying back to all the words pronounced by the king. So in this way he just replied philosophically and spiritually to all the points made by the king to wake up his conditioned, his unclear conditioning of life, its lack of spiritual vision. Anyway, what I find relevant in this section are really, there is this starting of this discussion between the saint and the king to just reawaken the king, which was in some way advanced spiritually, but it was the fit candidate to become a disciple and to propagate, to in his way as a king, to propagate God consciousness. Another point which is interesting is the fact that really, based on our capabilities, like our guna, so what our real qualities, our tendencies, can we do really any type of job, any type of work? Can we perform any type of activity in this society? So that's another interesting point which I find in this section. And also the importance, as King Raugana showed, the importance when we realize that we made an offense to immediately ask for forgiveness, mainly to those people which are really advanced. So this chapter 11 is called Jatbharata instructs King Raugana. So the conversation which started in chapter 10 now is continuing in chapter 11. And Jatbharata is instructing the king in more and deeper details. The king received first overall knowledge, but still he had questions, relevant questions, which he put forward to Jatbharata. And now Jatbharata is going deep and answering those points. So, but what is the central point? What is the central problem which Maharaj Raugana has got? The main point is his identification with his social position as a king. He's very attached, we can see, he's very attached to that position. Because theoretically, even if he understands that he is a soul, still he thinks that in this incarnation he has to act as a king. So the big job that Jatbharata is doing is to make him understand that, okay, you may think you're a king, but you have to move out from this identification. Because being a king, so being involved in social behavior, that with that conscience that you think you're a king, you are in a role that will not be helpful for your spiritual advancement. So what is the center of our identification in this material world? Jadbharata mentioned that the center is the mind. That's the controlling panel, which then defines who we think we are, who we think we are not. So the point Jadbharata wants to get to is that we need to control the mind. Once we can control the mind, we can gradually lose that identification, which will not bring us to nothing, if not to just stay in this material dimension. And once we get free from this, once we can control the mind, then gradually we can get free from material anxieties. It's just the concoction of the mind that makes us think that we pertain to this material world, and then we forget our real position as souls, but most of all our adhyatma, which is that we are servant of the Supreme. What I find interesting in this section is, of course, that this point that the mind is it creates designations, and so how relevant it is to control it. And then Srila Prabhupada in the last purport gives 3 ways to control it. One is not being indifferent to the orders of the mind, and the second one would be to always be behind your mind. When you think something, just like with a stick, giving recalling back to this proper position. And the third one is, of course, to follow the orders of our spiritual guides. So this is the final chapter in this section, chapter 12, which is entitled Conversation between Maharaj Raghugana and Jadbharata. The conversation continues. The king has got still little few doubts due to his situation and condition under ignorance, and Jadbharata is very keen in continuing giving extraction, or the text says nectarian words, to free the king from his condition. The king couldn't fully grasp all the instruction that Jadbharata was giving, because they were quite profound and elevated instruction. So he asked him to repeat them in other ways. So again, Jadbharata points out that designation is the problem, and the fact that the king was really thinking to be a king, and he could act as he wanted, as he did in the case with Jadbharata. That was the reason he was unfit, because his unfit state as king is because he did not have spiritual understanding. So how can you be a proper Kshatriya? How can you be a king protecting your citizens if you do not understand anything of spiritual life? Because the purpose of you being a king, the real protection that the king can give to citizens is to allow them to advance spiritually, whatever position they have in society. So, not knowing spiritual matter, how can you really protect the citizen? How can you really help them? So that was the point. Another point which Jadbharata wants to make really relevant is anything we see in this material world is based and follows transformation, and all matters follows transformation, as we see in Bhagavad Gita, Adibhuta. Anything transforms. So even your position as a king will move on, will get transformed. In the next life, you may get my position. That was the point that Jadbharata was making at the beginning. What I found quite interesting in this this chapter 12 is that Jad Bharata not only present this spiritual knowledge, but is so humble, so practical, that he informs the king that why he knows all these things, because he experienced in his previous life, which he still remembers. That's what he says. I still remember, Jad Bharata says, I still remember, thanks to the mercy of the Lord, my previous lives. So I know, just say, I know what I'm talking about. And then and the final point is that we really need to preserve our spiritual life. And the way to do it is to avoid bad association. For bad association, it means to avoid people that makes you think about a material conception of life. So what's the way to do that? Is to associate with devotees or people, spiritualists, which helps you to always remain connected with a spiritual understanding of material life, of life. And then the way the devotees help you is they will engage you in devotional service. And then you'll be able to go back to God. Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.